Welcome to Followed by Mercy with Austin Gardner. This is where we talk about God's grace and mercy that meets us and follows us even in our lowest moments and lifts us to hope again. No matter what's been broken, His love still heals. So let's move from pain to praise together, because surely goodness and mercy does follow me and pursue me all the days of my life. Well, I am excited today to have with me Pastor Rickey Howard of the Solid Rock Baptist Church in St. George, Utah. I had the privilege of preaching there. Beautiful, beautiful building, beautiful city, beautiful people, just a most wonderful time together that I had to get spent with them. And I've known Brother Howard for a long time. I call him Ricky. He's my friend, and he calls me Austin. He can call me Austin anytime he wants. I'm fine with that. And we're just going to chew the fat. And I learned all about the story of how God has worked in his life, and I believe is going to change your life. And so, man, I am grateful that you're here today, brother. And I don't want to rush it. And I want people listening to really get their story. And I want them to hear their story in your story. I want them to hear their story and your story. So before we get started here, maybe you'd just like to give a greeting, and then as soon as you finish that, kind of describe what your life is like today. What's your life like right now?
Yes, sir. So my name is Rickey Howard, and I heard about Brother Austin Gardner years ago, probably 2015, 14 or 15. First time I ever heard his name, and I say that now, knowing that probably growing up I heard his name because some of my family members went to his church plant in Cartersville, Georgia, years ago. But the first time remembering hearing your name was 2014 or 15, somewhere in there, and as I was preparing my life to come off the road, working in the oil and gas industry, into the local church, serving in the local church, trying to get my life in order so that I could do that. But I am now currently the church planter pastor here at Solid Rock Baptist Church, St. George, Utah. And we are thankful that God's used us out here at this point, so far to this point. Thankful for what he's done to get us here and what he's done since we've been here. Right now, our life is a complete 180 from what it was 15 years ago, when my oldest son was born. It's a complete different life than it was 13 years ago, 10 years ago when my youngest son was born. And I'm just thankful for what God can do in our lives when we turn it over all to him. It's an amazing thing to know how good God is, and not just to know it, not just to hear it, not just to talk about it, but to see it in your life. What an amazing thing it is.
Well, brother, tell them about your wife, how long you've been married, your children, how old they are, and anything you might want to just throw in real quick about Solid Rock.
Yes, sir. So my wife, April, maiden name's Woodall, but April Howard, and she is uh, she is she's my everything outside of Christ. It's her, and she is the workhorse of the ministry. She's the workhorse of the family. Without her, I don't know what we'd do, where we'd be, if I'm being honest. And most men who watch this or that you talk to will probably say the same thing about their wife. At least we hope so, right?
I hope so.
And so she is the as some of the men and women even here at Solid Rock Baptist Church, they say that she is the she's the mortar or the glue that holds it all together. And so I'm thankful for her. She and I were married in March of 2007, and so we just celebrated 19 years, going on 20 now. And I'm not old enough to be married 20 years. You can probably look at me and say,
Yes, you are.
20 years old. No, I'm just, but I don't feel like I'm old enough to be married 20 years, but we have two boys, two wonderful boys. Cash, he is our oldest, and he's just turned 15, and all he wants to do is drive around. He wants daddy to get in the truck and let's go ride. And I love it because that's all I want to do at that age. And we got Carter, our 10-year-old. He'll be 11 here in a few months. And he's a piano player. Let me say this. He's training to play piano, and he plays piano a little bit here at the church, and he he loves to play. Everybody says, "Where does he get his musical talent?" And I'm like, "From me." And they're like, "Well, what do you play?" And I'm like, "Nothing, but I could if I wanted to." Yes, but I do have a little bit of music, just my mind. If I can't do it instantly, I just put it away. And so I've always played instruments all through my childhood, all the way up till I started working, and then I just didn't have patience for it anymore. But that's where it comes from. I have a little bit of musical understanding, and I believe that's where he gets it from. And he's doing a wonderful job with it. He does great. He's a great piano player. He plays by ear, reads music, all these things. And I'm proud of my boys. They both work hard at what they do. Cash has been working since he started working before he turned 15. Got him a job at a gelato shop here in town, and he went from just going in there to be a stock boy behind the counter to now he is pretty much the second man over there. Everybody left, and it's just him and the owner kind of running things. He's the production. He does everything he can to keep the place going. And with what little hours he can work as a student, a homeschool student, that and uh, ministry and stuff like that. So, I was very proud of him. Very proud of Carter. He stays busy doing the music and other things. He likes playing the video games, which I don't really care for, but he enjoys doing it. He enjoys. He's got aspirations for life and things like that. And I will say, Cash has a passion for bus ministry. He's heard my story so much that he said that when he gets married and whether it's here or somewhere else, he wants to be a part of the bus ministry. And
Amen.
Carter has talked about wanting to be a missionary. Every country we visit, he wants to be a missionary there. Every missionary that comes through, he wants to be a missionary where they're going. He's I let him get up and give a little devotion when possible. And I told him, I said, "You're a little young to say you've been called to preach. Not that God can't use you, but you can start developing that skill set now and give little devotions and develop some little outlines and things like that." So he's done that. I think he's a couple of times back at our home church in Georgia, and a couple of times here he stood up and gave a little encouragement to the church and gave a little challenge. I don't know if he gets it from me or our pastor, Pastor Kyle Coker, or even knowing Brother Gardner here, but every time he stands up to preach, it's always, "We got to go tell him. We got to go tell him." He's always preaching missions and the gospel. And so I'm thankful for that. But our church here, we started our church. We just celebrated 3 years. We started January 29th of 2023, 15 of us in a little storefront here. God used this little church in a mighty way. At our 3-year anniversary, I had, just for a little encouragement, I had everybody who was saved in this ministry to stand up. And I would say probably about 80% of our church stood up, and not everybody was here either. And so it was kind of amazing to see that the church is not made up of a bunch of disgruntled church members. I learned this from somebody, not to build your church off a bunch of disgruntled church members,
Amen.
church off converts. And thankful for you teaching me that, and my pastor continuing to pound that you want to reach people, not steal people. And so uh,
Amen.
it's been a blessing here. We've seen some lives change, we've seen families change, and we've seen families put back together. We've seen marriages helped, and I honestly believe a lot of the people here I can relate to in some way, whether it's past struggles, work related, things like that. It's very easily relatable people that we've got in our church right now.
Ask the question I think some people might be wanting to know. Where in the world did Cash and Carter get their names? Come on now.
Everybody wants to know if it's Johnny Cash, June Carter, and we've started playing along with it. And honestly, I'm gonna be 100% honest. Okay, the
That's
first,
good. I'm glad to hear that.
outside of the Bible, the first book I ever read on my own was Johnny Cash's autobiography. Now,
Yeah.
that was in 2007. First time I ever picked up a book on my own outside of the Bible. I used to hate to read. I hated reading, and then I heard somebody. I was listening to somebody teach one day, and they said leaders are readers, and I said, "Oh, that stings." And so I started reading, and I enjoy reading now. But I read that book, but our kids' names, honestly, we sat down while we were on the pipeline job out here. Actually, we were sitting at our apartment we had rented here in this town, and we were going through baby names, and she she settled on three names. There was Camden, and I liked that one because I'm a baseball fan. And all I can think about is Camden Yards up in Baltimore, and then there was another one, and then I threw in Cash. We wanted a strong male name. His name is actually Richard Cash Howard. Uh, my dad was Richard. I'm Richard. None of us are juniors or seconds or thirds or anything like that. We all have different middle names. His is Richard Cash. Mine's Richard Lewis. My dad was Richard Bruce. And so I went with that Cash because we wanted him to have a strong presence when he introduced his name, and we thought Cash would give him that strong presence, in the introduction, and and I think it fits too. I couldn't imagine him being named anything else. But Carter, yeah, and Carter, his name come about again. We had three names picked out. April wanted to, she wanted to stick with the C's, and we had Corbin, Carter, and another name I can't even remember. And Cash narrowed it down to Corbin and Carter, and he's like, I don't like Corbin. I think that sounds weird. So we went with Carter. And as soon as he did that, me and April looked at each other and we said, we're going to get a bunch of comments on this, right? And she goes, yeah.
That's all right. It doesn't hurt any. Well, I am really blessed by your family, and I had a wonderful time out there. And boy, I loved Utah a lot more than I thought I would. And just, I am very honored to have this opportunity to talk to you. But I know that God has done a tremendous work in all of our lives, And if you're listening to this today on the podcast or on YouTube, I want you to know that we are followed by mercy. Surely goodness and mercy do follow us. They pursue us, they chase us. That's God working in your life. And if you don't know him yet, he's chasing you. And if you do know him, he's right there with you and he's running with you. Fact is, he's in front of you as your shepherd, he's behind you as goodness and mercy, and he lives in you because we live and move and have our being in him. And so I just want to brag on Jesus today and tell you some of the story of Rickey Howard. So take us back to the beginning, brother. What was life like for you as a little bitty guy?
So let's all the way back to the beginning. I'll give you the full scope. Um, I am the I'm the first born of my mom and dad, but I wasn't their first. There were two aborted before me. I was the first one that wasn't aborted. So I'm the first living child of my mom and dad. And honestly, if I sit here right now and I tried to tell you about, my early childhood, it's very spotty. They say that a lot of times you put things out of your mind that you don't want to remember, things like that. I don't know. My earliest memory of my dad was him and my mom. I was born in Adairsville, Georgia, or in Cartersville, Georgia. We lived in Adairsville, and my first memory of my dad, my mom and dad were fighting. They were standing at the front door of a single wide trailer right there on Highway 41 in Adairsville, Georgia. My dad picks me up and is holding me, and my mom takes a pair of scissors or a knife one. I can't remember which one it was, and stabs him twice while he's me. And then all I can remember from this event, I was small enough that, I was probably maybe 3 years old. And I can remember seeing the blood. And then I don't remember anything after that. But I remember throughout my childhood, throughout my life, there was always turmoil. There was always commotion. Yeah, I grew up in a home where it was my grandparents had young age. I had two uncles living in the house, plus my mom, myself, and my other brother. Eventually, he was born when I was two, and during our childhood, it was like I said, it was always a bunch of turmoil, always fighting, always something going on. My granddaddy was a World War II vet. He was worked CCC camps through after during the Depression. They both lived through the Depression, lived through World War II. My granddaddy, after he come out of the war, decided he'd never work for another man. Became a moonshiner. Started moonshining. He was from Kentucky, so I guess that was in his roots. And there was a long history of it before I was born, but my childhood where we lived, he had car lots, he had gas stations. He would have anything that could be a cover for it. Where I was born, the house I was raised, or the trailer that we lived in when I was first born, was connected to a station, and I can remember the coolers he used to keep the jugs in. Even as a young child, I can remember him keeping the jugs over there in the station in the coolers for when people would come by, or when he had to load up late at night and things like that. But there was always a fear that somebody was going to get arrested. There was always a fear that somebody was going to come in and rob us. There was always a fear of the unknowns, always a fear of trouble. Even when I was real young, I can still remember those fears.
Who are you talking about? Your granddad, correct?
Yes, this is my mom's dad, or my mom.
Your
Not
mom's dad. Well, where's your dad and mom right now? You're with your grandparents, correct?
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I don't I don't have many memories of my dad outside of him being in prison until his last 6 months when they let him out to die.
So how old was he? How old were you when he went to prison?
I'm not sure. I want to say
Very
probably,
small.
yeah. Yeah, because there were it's funny now, I think about it and I'm like, man, they really uh they tried to tell us anything but the truth. Of course, it was always he's off at boot camp or he's working on the road or something like that. But then I come to find out, later on, the whole time he was in prison. He went to prison for well, not apparently, but he went to prison for armed robbery. He robbed a store at knife point. He got off work. Went and spent all his. I guess he went and spent all his money on drugs. And Sunday before he went home, he knew that my grandmother would be mad, so he had to have something to take home. So he went and robbed the store at knife point. I don't remember how much it was. It was a measly little amount of money. Went to prison he got a 12-year sentence. I don't know how much he served of it because they let him out in December. He died in that following July.
How old were you when he died?
I just turned 10, 2 weeks before he died.
So you didn't know your dad very much at all.
Not really, not really at all. I had uh, fascination of what he was or what he could be, but never really knew him.
So that may play into part of what I saw you doing as a dad and working so hard at being a good dad. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. But maybe because you didn't have a dad, that might help you want to be such a good dad. And so I thank the Lord for that. But so you went from your mom and dad's place to your granddaddy's place.
So my mom and dad never had a place. Um, she was with my grandparents the whole time. I guess they had a place for a short amount of time, but uh, I I lived with either a set of grandparents or an aunt and uncle my whole childhood. And 90% of that was with my grandparents on my mom's side.
Now, you told me you really loved and admired your granddad.
Yeah. Well, I called them mother and daddy. That was, that was my names for them were mother and daddy. And I don't know if that was because what I heard other people call them, but that's really what they were to me. They were mother and daddy. I mean, if it wasn't for them, we would be, who knows where we'd have been or what we'd have been going through.
Now, if I remember right, you know what it's like to sit at a kitchen table, and I'm gonna leave it there and you take it You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I can remember, I was probably about between 9 and 12 years old. Um, my granddaddy would come in and he would always carry 2 wallets, but when he would come in off a big run, a moonshine run, he would have 3 wallets. And, he would come in after his big runs, he'd leave on, like, a Friday and come back on a Sunday night, and he'd always take his nice car, he'd always do something like that. But he'd come back and he would take the coffee table in the living room and put a wallet on it, and then the kitchen table, he'd throw 2 wallets down on it, and we would stack money in stacks of 1,000. And I never understood. I can remember one day we didn't have anything to eat, and my grandmother was scrounging up, and she was making things up to make cornbread, and she had some strychnine in the refrigerator, and so or fatback, whatever you want to call it. And so our dinner that night was cornbread and fatback, and you just chew on the fatback and eat cornbread. And I looked at her and I said, "Mother, just the other night we counted out over $10,000. Why ain't we got no food?" She said, "'Cause that ain't real money." I said, "Well, it felt real to me." And she said, "Yeah, but when it's liquor money or drug money, it ain't never real. You can't spend it." And I confused me more than anything, but I didn't grasp. I touched this money. I held this money. This was real money, but, and it was in our hands. It was in our pocket or in his pocket. It was in our home, but it wasn't for us to use. It was big.
Okay. So what did it feel like? Did all this just feel normal to you when you were a kid?
I honestly, I don't remember when it was that I started kind of, lying about you know, what was going on or what people did or any of that. Now I do know that, when I got up in high school age and things like that, I thought, "Oh, it's cool. I got an outlaw granddaddy and our house runs on an outlaw lifestyle and all that." I thought it was cool and I tried to, look it up, you know what I mean? But that probably around middle school, realizing I guess it's about that age. You get about 12, 13 years old and you start realizing what other people have and you understand what you don't have. We used to watch these guys. When we were early teenage years, the BMX bikes were real big. Everybody was going out buying these real expensive BMX bikes and things like that. Me and my brother, we couldn't afford those. So what me and my brother would do is we would go and we would find the BMX bikes that people had thrown out, and we would take 4 or 5 BMX bikes and we would take them all apart and then build our own. And everybody would be like, "Where'd you get that bike? That's an expensive bike." And we're like, "Oh yeah, man, this is, you know, this was my birthday present. This is my Christmas present or something." But really, and then we started, there was a couple of them we were able to build and we were able to sell. And, we sold some to some other, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but we would find the other trailer park kids, and we'd be like, "Hey, $20, you can have this bike," and then $20, you sell a bike for $20, you can eat for a couple of days, and so
So when you were a little boy, let's say under the age of 10, did you feel warm, love? Did you have enough to eat? Was life good? How was life?
those were sorry.
That's fine. That's what we want. Tell the truth.
I didn't know I'd get emotional on it, but those were probably the worst years. That was, We had just come out of probably 5 years of custody battles, moving around, not knowing anything. My brother and I, we'd have an appointment at family court, and so for 2, 3, 4 nights, we'd have to go stay at this group home, this little foster home in Atlanta. And we moved to a couple different homes, a couple different family members over a couple year span till we finally got back into my granddad's home, my mother and daddy's home. And not long after we got back in their home, we found out that my dad was going to die with cancer. And just a reminder, I didn't really know him. I knew who he was. I knew him, but I had this fascination about what he could be. And my grandmother in South Georgia, who we lived with for a moment during all the custody battles, she talked my mother down, not my mother, but my mom. She talked my mom down so much that I, without understanding why, I had a hatred for my mom. And I can remember this at a young age. And when we go back to live with it, when we go back to that home with her parents and her and my stepdad, I had no respect for her. And I know this now. I look at it now and I understand this and I know this, and I probably made it harder on her than what I should have, but it was the information that was fed to me from my grandmother there. But those years were, I feel like, a daily fight between 8 years old and probably 11 or 12. I feel like every day was, I didn't want to go home. I would get out of school and I didn't want to go home. I spent most of my days down at the park down from our house, and I spent most of my days around people I shouldn't have, with people I shouldn't have. At a young age, I was hanging out with some much older people who were doing some things that I didn't want to go home and be around, but I didn't mind being around them do it. Does that make? I don't know if that makes sense. Uh, so not that I did what they were doing, but I would rather have been there with them doing it than at home with the people at home doing it. But like I said,
What about?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But those years right there, I say there was a 4-year span there between moving in that house back to that house in Adairsville with my grandparents, my mom, my stepdad, moving in there till a couple years after my dad died. Those were probably some of the worst up until I was probably about 16 or 17. Those were probably about the worst.
What about food? Did you have food and clothes? How was that?
Just about once a week, I'll walk into my closet here in Utah and I'll look at how many pairs of pants and how many shirts I have, and remember having to do this mismatch roulette with my clothes growing up, because I would always have 2 pair of pants and 3 shirts until I started working and buying my own clothes. I would have maybe a t-shirt, maybe a polo, maybe a couple t-shirts, maybe, something like that. But I can remember in school somebody saying, "Didn't you just wear that shirt yesterday?" And my anxiety, I just got up and walked home, because I only lived about a half mile from the school. And so when somebody asked me that one day, I just walked out of class and walked home. And I can remember stopping by the goldfish pond. There's a house on the way between the school and my house had a little goldfish pond. and I remember sitting there I was so mad, I was trying to hit goldfish with a rock, and I thought that would solve something. It was just, one of those things. Food, I mean, you look at me now, you can tell I made it, but um, food was one of those things where that you know it was very rare that we didn't have cornbread in the house. I guess then and being in Georgia, that was a cheap thing you could do. At least you can mix up some cornmeal and water. But we seemed to always have cornbread in the house. But I can remember I remember days, I remember nights that, it would be dinner time, there's nothing on the table, there's nothing in the refrigerator, and it was like, "What are we gonna do for dinner?" And, there are nights that my grandmother used to save every condiment packet that come from a fast food place she would save, and, there was some tartar sauce from Long John Silver's or something, the packets in there, and I remember taking saltine crackers and tartar sauce and doing about 4 or 5 of those, and that was dinner one night. It happened more than once. Mayonnaise crackers, tartar sauce crackers, I never eat ketchup, so there never was ketchup crackers. But those were some dinners some nights. But I'm thankful my dad's sister, my aunt, she owned we lived on a loop, and she owned about 4 houses on that loop at that time. I think she owns everything but 2 now. And, there were times growing up when when I really wanted to get away, I really wanted to disappear and not be in that home, I could I could just go there. There were there were times where, and I'm not gonna lie, I love her to death, and, she's always tried to take care of us, but there were times where she was overwhelmed and she didn't answer the door, and I understand that now. There were because you know, she had 4 kids of her own, and she had grandchildren, and she had other responsibilities, and I told her just the other day, I said, "You have raised 5 generations of children. It's time for the people to leave you alone, let you stop." But yeah, we had people around, and I'm thankful for that. But there were some rough times. There were some hard times.
What about any kind of physical abuse?
You know, in all honesty, uh, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. We we were we didn't we didn't get disciplined when we did things wrong. We got disciplined when we inconvenienced. Does that make sense? My grandparents didn't really discipline us. And I see that a lot. When people ask me about grandparents raising children, my advice is if you can get away from that, get away from it because the grandparents already been through the disciplining, and the grandparent just wants to love. They don't want to go through that discipline stage. And I know that
That's
because I
right.
was raised by grandparents. They never raised a hand. They never disciplined, nothing. They even made excuses when we did dumb things, But my mom, she disciplined for inconvenience, not for wrongdoing. You inconvenience my day, you're going to pay. Now, yes, some unconventional things, wire hangers, I don't think is unconventional. I mean, this is me talking. This is my opinion. In those days, I mean, a wire hang, I needed a strap. You know what I mean? I needed every one of them I got. I deserved every one of them. Drop cords, some of it may be a little over the top. Probably the one thing that really sticks in my head about a over the top discipline was I don't, and this breaks my heart to this day, but my brother just under me, he was sitting in front of the TV, and I think somebody asked him to move, and he didn't move, and my mom grabbed a basket, like a woven wooden basket, had a large base on it, and swung and hit him on top of the head, and his head just split open. And I can remember thinking, why would you do that to your child? But that was probably now my stepdad. I didn't, I didn't respect him, and I really hate to say this, but rightfully so. He didn't provide. He didn't care. He's he was and is a drug addict. He's very. I say he is. I don't know what he's up to now, but I he wasn't. he didn't take the place of a father as a stepdad, but I didn't respect him, and him and my mom fought a lot, and there were so many times, even though my mom wasn't the best mom, when he would raise his hand to my mom, I would go in swinging, and I would get my butt whooped so many times. And I've told a lot of people there's only two people in this world that's ever whooped my butt, and that was my brother under me and my stepdad. That's the only people that's ever beat me up. And so, but I will say he was a compassionate drunk fighter, where he'd lay a couple of licks and then he'd apologize for it. He was very remorseful for what he did, because he was always drunk when he did it, and I'm not taking up for him or anything like that, but it was, I don't know. You could tell, certain people, you can tell that they could be good people if they would just let God do something in their lives.
So how old were you think, when you figured out something ain't right here? This just ain't the way it's supposed to be. Life ain't supposed to be like this.
Probably about 8 or 9 years old, when the preacher at the church beside us, our yard's full of police officers, and I don't remember what happened, but the yard's full of police officers, and we're outside in the midst of it, and he comes down there and grabs me and my brother and takes us to the church fellowship hall. And he just says, "Y'all," he fixes us something to eat, and he's just sitting there with us, and we're worried, and I kept saying, "I need to be down there with mother and daddy. I need to be down there with mother and daddy." And he said, "They're okay." And he said, let everything pan out and you can go back. And that's when I knew, if I feel this as a kid, I feel like I need to be there to protect my grandparents, and not thinking about who's taking care of me, who's taking care of my brother. That's when I realized, I was like, this ain't, this is a different dynamic than what it should be.
Who do you think most shaped you? Who would have been, and we're still 10 years old and younger right now, but who do you think had the most influence on your life?
At that age, I don't know, because I feel like I got to a certain point in life, and I made a complete change in everything. But I would say the most influence in my life up to that point were both of my granddads. Um, both of my granddads really shaped who I was, and then thankfully there were other people mixed in that. The preacher that lived next to us was a very kind man, spent time with us, played ball with us, all these different things. My granddad, who lived down in South Georgia, was a kind man, a loving man. He was funny. He was the funniest person you'd ever meet. Uh, our last name's Howard, and he always told me that he was the fourth Three Stooge, but they kicked him out because he wasn't pretty enough. And so that was he was funny. He would have fit right in with the Three Stooges. But he was a very funny man, and my brother just under me, he has a lot of that sense of humor, and I feel like the older I get, the more I pick that sense of humor out of myself and let it go. But now I see it in my youngest son now. I see that sense of humor in him. But those
Well,
men,
we're going to get around to talking about the solution, but today you have heard Brother Rickey explain to you what it was like growing up for him. And I don't know who you are listening. I don't know what family member you have listening, but God radically, totally changed, rescued, saved, redeemed the life of Rickey Howard. He is now a successful pastor, missionary, church planner, husband, more than anything, husband, and dad, and all of that because of the grace of God. So I want you to come back tomorrow, and I want you to watch tomorrow as we go further into this story and we learn a little bit more about what God has done in the life of Pastor Rickey Howard. And I know you may be starting in a bad place where your discipline is incorrect, where the influences in your life are not right, maybe where you're going hungry and don't have the clothes, maybe where you feel picked on or abused by society or life and kids at school even. But there is hope. And so I want you to hang in there and listen. And tomorrow we'll be back with more. What I want you to learn out of this lesson is followed by mercy, because from dismal beginnings, God did something great in Rickey Howard's life and is doing something great in his life, because it's about how great our God is. Brother Rickey, take 2 minutes and kind of close this session out. It's about your childhood. We get to the rest of the story, but you say a few things, and whenever you finish, I'll stop this recording.
You know, today I look back into my childhood, and I'm not sorry for any of it. I don't, I don't have any. I don't wish I grew up in the big house down the street, or the nicer family down the road or anything. I through all that, I can anything I say, about how neglectful of a mother I had or anything like that. At the end of the day, God saved me. And then not even a year, well, just about a year ago, God saved my mom right before she passed in September last year. So, I was forced to in the home, I was forced to grow up a little bit quicker than I should have. But, I look back and I hear stories from guys who grew up 2 generations before me, and I'm like, well, they had to do it. So what's the problem with me having to do it? At the end of the day, God knew what was going on. God knew what was happening, but he was still there. And every time I can think about going and shutting myself off, or walking down the street at night, walking away from a fight, going down to the corner in the dark and sitting in the dirt and just asking God why, because of now. Everything then had a purpose for now. Whether it's somebody that I can talk to, somebody that I can counsel, somebody I can lead to the Lord, raising my own children, being a husband to my wife, all of that created what's going on now. And only because of God. Not because of me, but because of him. And I can't be mad about it. I was just talking to my wife the other day. I really sought out to enjoy my life when I was younger, just as I seek to, enjoy it now. Joy. He knew when to keep me encouraged. And I'm thankful I could go on are you willing to let him be? I wasn't taught the gospel in our home, but I knew who Jesus was. I knew a little bit about Jesus. And because of that, I had a desire, and I knew that there was something and there was somebody who could take the hurt and do something with it. I couldn't do nothing about it. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. What was I going to do about it? I know at 14 years old, I did everything I could to get out of the house and go to work. I still couldn't do nothing about the hurt. Still couldn't do anything about the trouble. I still couldn't do anything about people going to jail every weekend. Still couldn't do anything about worrying about my granddaddy dying while I'm anything about those worries. But God could. God could give me peace. God could settle my heart, and he could help me through. And if I could just encourage you one thing today, no matter what you got going on, what you're going through, or what somebody else is going through, there is hope. We just have to be willing to look for it and accept it.
Now, you listen to me. Brother Howard's told you some of the story. Well, we got 4 or 5 more episodes going to come out of here over the next few days, but I want you to know that what the devil and the sinful world meant to destroy Rickey Howard, the devil and a sinful world wanted to destroy him. God has turned that to the glory of God and even the good of Rickey Howard, April, Cash, and Carter. It's all God. And I just want you to know that it's available for you. I know you're hurting, and I know you're like, it won't work for me, but it will work for you. So you keep listening. We're going to give you more of it. Tomorrow, you come back, bring a friend, and listen as Brother Rickey tells the story of being followed by mercy, the story of God's grace. I believe you're going to enjoy it. Give us a like, share this with somebody, and maybe God will bless others. Thank y'all very much for being with us. Thanks for listening to Followed by Mercy with Austin Gardner. If today's message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs to know God hasn't given up on them. Remember, your pain isn't the end of your story. In Jesus, it can become praise. Thank you.